humility. Humility is something that doesn't come naturally. It needs to be practiced. Like anything that you want to be good at, you have to actually practice humility. It's not something that you're just born with. In fact, I don't think we're born with much of it at all. Humility takes the action of submission. To submit is something that nobody likes to do. In sports, if you submit to your competitor, you're just acknowledging you win, I lose. In marriage, we know the word submit is in the Bible in Ephesians chapter 5. Wives, submit to your husbands. My mom read that and she said, before she died, she said, I don't like that Paul. He didn't like women. I said, I don't know that he meant everything that you think he meant. And she goes, well, I don't know. I don't want to submit to anybody. We don't want to submit. And in a marriage, if only one person is submitting, it's a rotten marriage. Humility views others not as competitors, but as fellow children of God, walking the same path on this journey together. Humility allows us to disagree with each other without calling names or thinking a person who doesn't agree with us is moronic or dumb. And I mention this a lot, and I'm going to keep mentioning it until I don't see it happening with my church members anymore. We got to stop getting online and on social media and calling people that we don't agree with morons and idiots and stupid. Whatever party affiliation you might think you want to have, however loyal you want to be to the empire, our loyalties are not to the empire and its minions. Our loyalty is to Christ and his mission. And we have to keep remembering that. Believe in whatever policies you want and argue that, but stop calling people names, even if they're politicians that you don't know. Doesn't matter if it's the president or one of the Congress people. We got to stop, because that is not Christ-like behavior. That is antichrist behavior. We don't do that. We are full of humility because Christ clothes us with humility. I found some quotes on humility, and I wasn't going to use this one because I thought maybe it's not appropriate for church, but I get away with everything else so far. So, my favorite quote on humility is, humility is like underwear. You really need it, but you don't want it to show. I like that one. Humility leads to strength and not to weakness, this author says. It is the highest form of self-respect to admit mistakes and to make amends for them. I like this one. Plenty of people wish to become devout, but no one wants to become humble. And then this one. I have often wished that I had the time to cultivate humility, but I'm too busy thinking about myself. When I was a little boy, my mom, I was actually not that little. In fourth grade, I was already almost taller than my mom. But in fourth grade, we started going to a private school, to an Adventist school. My sister was in second grade. My mom would pick us up, and she would drive one exit down in Linwood, Washington to 196. Actually, 44th Street was the exit. She'd go over to 196 and take a right toward our house, and we would go by the IGA grocery store. Do you remember IGAs? You remember those? I don't think they're around anymore, are they? Maybe? I don't know. IGA grocery store. And my mom was a single parent, and the manager in the IGA liked my mom. I could see that even in fourth grade. And so she would stop every time we passed there and go in to get my sister and I a little afternoon snack. Usually that afternoon snack was a Snickers bar. One Snickers bar. It was our favorite one. And we'd get back into the car, we'd get in the back seat, and she'd take it out of the wrapper, and she'd get her thumbs, and she had thumbnails, and she'd try to find the middle, and she'd go like this and put a line in the middle of that candy bar, and she'd break it in half, and she'd hand it back to my sister and I. What do you think we did? Instantly, we had that thing, and we were measuring to see who had more of the half and everything, and we'd start whining and crying. Oh, you've got more nougat than I do. Well, you got more peanuts on your side than I do. And we'd sit there, and it would be melting in our hands as we were arguing about who didn't have the Snickers bar, the biggest part of the Snickers bar. Well, we would do this until my mom would yell at us, and in a split second, she would turn around, she'd grab both halves of the Snicker bar, yank them from our hands, and shove them in our mouth and eat them. She ate our Snickers bars, and it happened just about every day. I think it's safe to say that my sister and I didn't exemplify humility. We weren't good at it. What would have happened if when my mom gave us the candy, I would have insisted that my sister go ahead and choose the half she wanted first? Here, you just choose. And then been happy with what I had left over. There would have been a lot more peace in the car. My sister and I would have loved each other a lot more if I would have done that. And my mom would have probably weighed 10 less pounds. I believe that it's not our nature to be humble and submissive with each other. It's just not how we're wired in this body of sin. I think this is one of those things that we just have to have instruction on, and we need to be intentional about. We have to think about it. I think this because I think that most of us are naturally selfish people. It's an unnatural act to be humble and to humble ourselves and treat each other better than they deserve, or at least we think they deserve. When I was a kid, my friends and I used to play this game called King of the Hill. Our neighbors had, their backyard was kind of flat, but in the middle there was this hump, and they let the grass grow on it. It was weird. I think they thought it was like cool, but it was just looked like a lump in their backyard. Anyway, the lump raised up about this high from the ground, and my friends and I would play King of the Hill. Have you ever played King of the Hill? King of the Hill is when you go up and you try to stand your ground on top of this hill, and everybody's job is to knock you off so that they can stand up on top of the hill. And it's a really, really fun game when you're an adolescent boy. It was like tackle football out there. I'm telling you, it was competitive. You get up on the hill and you just try to get and somebody, boom, come up from behind and hit you, and you go flying, and then you turn around and run up behind and push them off, and everybody's trying to get a shot at being on top, at being king of the hill. Unfortunately, that game isn't just a kid's game. It's played out in our government, in our workplaces, in our schools, in our social clubs, and yes, in our churches. And it happens all the time. And it's a game that we are all too eager to play. See, this game of King of the Hill started in heaven with Lucifer. He wanted to be the king of the hill. When he got knocked off of the hill, he decided to spread the game a little bit to Adam and Eve. They wanted to be the king of the hill. It wasn't long before Cain, their son, wanted to be king of the hill, and he killed Abel because he wanted to be number one. And on down the annals of time, each generation learned to manipulate, scratch, kick, and claw because everybody wants to have their own way. Everybody wants to be number one. Everybody wants to be the king of the hill. In Daniel 2, Nebuchadnezzar was thrilled to hear that he was the king of the hill. He was the head of gold. But what Nebuchadnezzar doesn't understand is when you play king of the hill, there's always somebody that's going to come and knock you off that hill. The Medo-Persians came next. They're the king of the hill. They get knocked off by Greece, and they get knocked off by Rome, and then lots of kings of the hill. And now, some people would like to think that the empire that we are under is the king of the hill. Let me remind you, no empire stands forever. The kingdom stands forever. And whoever you think the king of this hill isn't going to last. Nebuchadnezzar, he fought hard to be number one. Even made a big statue of himself and said, everybody's got to worship it. I got to be number one. Shouldn't be playing king of the hill. Last night at First Friday, it was fantastic. It was at the hospital, and the chaplain from the Portland Trailblazers was speaking, and he said something. He said the word ego, E-G-O, the ego, the self, stands for easing God out. Pride and arrogance are at their worst when religious people practice it. Their insatiable need to be right, to have God's will all figured out better than everybody else. It gives them the excuse to look down on all the people who don't have their clear understanding of Scripture or God's will or the spirit of prophecy like they do. And what we do is we baptize our pride, our rightness in being correct. It's okay to have this kind of pride because we're right. And we think that our arrogance is godly when it's bathed in correct theology. And nothing could be further from the truth. This is what Ellen White says. I read this and I had to take a breath afterward because it was a gut punch. She does that sometimes. Those who presume to think that they stand accepted on the account of their ministerial commission, their multitudinous duties and exercise of devotion, make a grave mistake. Often their lips express poverty of soul that their heart does not acknowledge. While speaking to God of poverty of spirit, of the defections of others, the heart is swelling with the conceit of their superior humility. Let me tell you about how humble I am. The exercise of their superior righteousness. This is humility upon stilts, she says. Humility upon stilts. I often wondered why I'm so tall. When the Lord touches their defects of reproof, they do not receive it or believe it. They're religious Nebuchadnezzars. I'm just going to say it. We are religious Nebuchadnezzars sometimes. This is just a hard lesson for us to learn. It's a hard lesson for me to learn. As a denomination, we think that we are the king of the hill. We're the remnant. As individual people, we keep playing king of the hill. When are we going to realize that the hill is Calvary and that Jesus is the king and not us? In John 13:35, Jesus said, listen, this is how people are going to know that you're my disciples, by how much you love each other. And that word love, that agape love, is a self-sacrificing submission love. It's the kind of love that allows your creation to beat the tar out of you and nail you to a cross. It's the kind of love that hears your disciples arguing, I'm number one. No, I'm number one. Oh yeah, well look at my muscle. Oh yeah, well look at my muscle. My dad can beat your dad. And he gets so sick of it that he takes off his clothing, standing there in his underwear. He wraps a towel around himself and he kneels down. The king of the universe kneels down and he washes the feet of all the number ones. They'll know you are Christians by your agape love. This is what the remnant church is supposed to be known for. How are we doing? How are we doing? The world is supposed to be able to distinguish God's remnant people from their love. Let me ask you a crazy question. I'm going to pick on somebody. I don't know who I'm going to pick on, but I got to pick on somebody. Pastor Jonathan, welcome. And now I'm going to pick on you. Middle child. What's your middle child's name? Robbie? Hard question. Maybe. Would you be willing to give up your salvation, forfeit it, if you know that it would secure Robbie's salvation for eternity? You'd do that? Good answer. Deb, would you be willing to sacrifice your personal salvation, your eternity, if you knew it meant that Andy got to spend eternity in heaven? Right? For those of you who have children or spouses that you love, that's a pretty easy answer, isn't it? Isn't it? You'd sacrifice for the kids we just baptized, right? You'd say, take my salvation if it means that they get it. Okay, now I'm going to turn a corner. Not for you, for everybody. Would you be willing to trade your salvation in for the person that hates you the most in this world? Would you be willing to sacrifice your salvation if it meant that ISIS member in Syria who is screaming death to America, if they saw you in Syria, they would take you and do horrible things to you? Would you be willing to sacrifice your personal salvation knowing that you will not be saved if it secured their salvation? This is the humility of Jesus. While we were yet his enemies, while we were yet against him, Christ died for us. The person that you are sitting in church right now and thinking about that you just can't stand, Jesus took the risk. He said, I will trade my salvation for theirs. We are told that Christ could not see to the other side of that cross. He had no guarantee in his mind that he would see the other side of that cross. And who is he doing this for? He's doing it for the people that just slapped the snot out of him, pulled his beard and hit him over the head with a stick and whipped him till he was almost dead. He did that for them because he hung there, and these people had blood in their eyes, and he hung there and he said, Father, forgive them. This is the humility we're called toward. This is the submission we're called toward. This is godly humility. I want to end with an appeal from Philippians chapter 2. This is Paul talking to the church. And this is me talking to you. If you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if you have any comfort from his love, if you have any fellowship with the Spirit, if you have any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and one in purpose. Don't do anything out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Don't be like Nebuchadnezzar, but in humility, consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but to the interests of others also. Your attitude should be the same as that of Jesus Christ, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but he made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant. And that word servant in Greek is doulos, and it's just as easily called slave. Being made in human likeness, being found in appearance as a man, Jesus humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross for you and for me. And now he says, I call you into my humility. Our final prayer is a song. And the